All right, the next one I want to talk about is kind of one of those Marvel flagship properties that the MCU has barely touched a little bit with the Multiverse of Madness, but not really gotten into it yet, and that's the Fantastic Four. There have been movies, there have been comics forever for this one, and the MCU hasn't gotten too much of it. So, what do you think the Fantastic Four will be for us?
Yeah, so there's been a couple of things. We've certainly seen John Krasinski play Mr. Fantastic in the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I don't think he's going to reprise that role. I think that might be a one and done. I hope that's a one and
Gotcha. I
done.
hope he's a variant.
Yes, that he's a variant. And there's a couple things that have been hinted both in and out of the film. So one, Doctor Strange makes a joke about the Fantastic Four of like, oh, didn't you guys chart in the 60s? So potentially hinting at something similar to Captain Marvel, where the Fantastic Four existed in the 60s of the Marvel Universe. Maybe they weren't seen as superheroes, or maybe they were seen as celebrities. They existed in some capacity, and maybe they disappeared since the 60s. That would be a fine way. I don't necessarily, love that idea, but it's maybe cleaner than just introducing them from the get-go. Kevin Feige has said outside of film narrative that the new upcoming film is not going to be an origin story.
Okay.
The origin story for the Fantastic Four is quick. He's a scientist, Reed Richards. He gets his girlfriend. He gets his girlfriend's brother. He gets his friend who's a pilot. They steal a space shuttle. They go up into space. They get zapped. They come back. They have powers. They become a team. Like that. It's pretty quick, and you could do that either in the opening credits, which would be cool, or just, I think you tell it in some capacity. They haven't, I guess they've had as many iterations as Peter Parker.
Okay.
And so we never saw Peter Parker's origin story in the Tom Holland version, but I think definitively, I think you tell that story quickly in snippets and then move on. Even the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk hints at and steals some stuff from the Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno Incredible Hulk show to kind of retell some of the story, but also wants to tell its own thing without having to spend 30 to 40 minutes to a whole movie explaining who this character is in terms of their origin story. So, all right, we know it might be set in the 60s. We know it might not be an origin story. I know Peyton Reed, who directed all three of the Ant-Man films, Ant-Man, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. He, before any of those Ant-Man films, was going to direct a Fantastic Four movie for Fox. It was going to be set in the 60s. It was going to be a period piece. He was looking at people like George Clooney to play Reed Richards. I believe like Charlize Theron to play Sue Richards. But his previous film, before he was going to produce and direct Fantastic Four, was a film set in the 60s called Down with Love, starring Ewan McGregor and Renee Zellweger. The studio loved it. It was a flop. And since it was a flop, I think they said, maybe you're not our Fantastic Four guy. I think, based on his love for that franchise, the Fantastic Four, and what he's already doing with Marvel and how he works really well in the Marvel system, I think Peyton Reed would be a good pick to direct Fantastic Four. Now, my theory of what that story could be and how it leads into other things starts with how we saw Reed Richards in Doctor Strange. Okay. Reed Richards introduces this idea of a multiverse incursion as he's speaking to Doctor Strange. An incursion is when there is such nonsense happening in the multiverse that two universes in the multiverse crash into each other, resulting in the destruction of either one of those universes or both of those universes. So really bad stuff, cataclysmic event caused by people meddling in the multiverse, which seems to be what's happening a lot, and that's the saga that we're in, the multiverse saga. So I think part of the Fantastic Four film is Reed Richards trying to deal with an incursion.
Okay.
Now, where it might find its root in the comics is Jonathan Hickman, who is a pretty prolific Marvel writer. He just revamped the X-Men pretty recently. Probably about 7 or 8 years ago, he revamped the Fantastic Four. And where it started, the initial premise was one of the things that Reed Richards wanted to do was solve everything. He wanted to fix everything. He wanted to have the ultimate fix for all of the world's problems. He's thinking big picture. Reed Richards is naturally very egotistical. He doesn't trust anybody. He's locking himself in a room and trying to do this by himself. He realizes this is a Herculean task, and eventually he stumbles upon a multiverse council of other Reed Richards, the Council of Reeds, if you will. And so that's where this ego kind of expands, and he goes, well, I want to solve this. I'm so smart, I don't trust anyone else other than me to solve this, so I'm going to get a multiverse council of me's to help me solve everything. Now, the big end game, no pun intended, but for the big end point for this saga is an Avengers Kang Dynasty and an Avengers Secret War. Now, the thing about Kang, who seems to be the main villain for the multiverse saga, we met him in Loki, a version of him. He's going to be an Ant-Man, and I think that he is going to be the main villain of the multiverse saga. Part of his origin is that he is a descendant, maybe in the year 3000, but he is a descendant of Reed Richards. I think Kang eventually shows up in, maybe the Fantastic Four does a similar story. Reed is trying to solve the incursion. He doesn't trust anybody but himself. He finds a multiverse council of Reeds, or Reed Richards, or Richards' descendants, and he sees Kang. He meets Kang.
Gotcha.
And Kang tricks him. Kang uses Reed Richards' own ego against him. And he says, I'll help you solve this incursion that's coming. I will help you prevent this incursion coming. But he tricks Reed into causing an incursion. And so when this incursion comes, that's when all of the multiverses, because it seems like we got a big mess of multiverses that are happening with Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange and Loki. And I think there's still a couple of other things that, and What If? I think there's a big mess of the multiverse. And when Kang tricks Reed Richards into causing an incursion, it explodes the entire multiverse. And I think Kang picks up the pieces and rebuilds it in his own image. And that's where I think we at least get that first Avengers film, Kang Dynasty, is as the multiverse has exploded and Kang has kind of handpicked the pieces that he likes to rebuild his own version of the multiverse of the universe, that's where we get the Kang Dynasty. Eventually the Avengers are going to have to deal with that, and I think that's where we get into Secret Wars.
If you like this video, like and subscribe. If you really like this video, visit synergylovescompany.com for the full audio podcast.